Poor black farmer wins mega millions, but something happens that no one could have expected. Winning the mega millions was supposed to be the answer to all of Joseph's prayers, a moment that could turn his modest life into one of comfort and ease. But instead of celebration, his quiet farmhouse remains steeped in silence, holding secrets deeper than anyone could imagine. Joseph's gaze, once filled with quiet determination, now carries the weight of a life-altering decision. What could drive a man to hide the one thing that could change his destiny? What happens when a simple farmer marked by love, loss, and resilience turns his unimaginable fortune into something no one expected? This is Living Narratives, where every story touches the soul and makes you reflect on life's most profound moments. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and join us as we uncover the extraordinary twists in Joseph's journey. Joseph trudged through the dry fields, his worn boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each deliberate step. The morning sun slowly painted the sky in golden hues, but he barely noticed the beauty around him. His gaze remained fixed on the earth below, as if the cracked soil held answers to the questions that had haunted him for years. In the modest house ahead, his 15-year-old daughter Emily lay asleep on the sofa, surrounded by scattered notebooks and colored pencils. Joseph entered quietly, careful not to disturb her. She clutched a sketchbook in her hands, its pages filled with detailed drawings of horses and competition tracks. The illustrations seemed alive, as though she had poured her dreams into every curve and stroke. He reached out, gently touching the edge of the sketchbook, his lips curling into a faint, melancholic smile. Letting her rest, he made his way to the kitchen, where he opened the farthest drawer and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. The lottery ticket, its numbers seared into his memory, felt heavy in his calloused hand. He stared at it in silence, the small kitchen filled with the sound of his measured breathing. This could change everything, but not the way they think, he murmured to himself. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, meant only for the walls to hear. Sliding the ticket back into the drawer, he closed it carefully, though his thoughts lingered on the secret it held. Emily stirred awake shortly after, rubbing her eyes as the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the room. "Good morning, Dad," she said, her voice cheerful. "Today I'm going to draw the biggest horse ever, one that could win any race." There was an innocence in her tone that made Joseph's heart ache with a bittersweet heaviness. He responded with a nod and a faint smile, his words caught somewhere between his heart and his throat. There was so much he wanted to say, so many promises he wished to make, but the weight of the unknown held him back. For the 1,000th time, he questioned whether the ticket in his drawer was a blessing or a burden too great to bear. The morning unfolded like any other, filled with the routine of farm chores and few exchanges of words. Yet within Joseph, a storm brewed. He knew a decision had to be made, but fear and love for the simple life he and Emily shared held him in place. As the sun began its descent, Joseph found Emily in the barn, her sketchbook balanced on her lap. She was deep in concentration, filling another page with vivid drawings. When she looked up, her face lit up with an idea. "Dad, if I could, I'd turn this farm into a place filled with horses and kids running around. A place where everyone could be happy. Do you think that's possible?" Joseph paused, his gaze meeting hers. He wanted to say yes, to promise her the world, but all he could manage was to place a firm hand on her shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Anything is possible, Emily," he finally said. Though his voice carried the weight of a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Night fell, and Joseph returned to the drawer, pulling the lottery ticket out once more. He held it under the dim light of the kitchen, the numbers glowing faintly, as if daring him to take the next step. His chest tightened, but his resolve was beginning to take shape. Closing his eyes, he whispered, "For you, Emily. It'll all be for you." The chapter closed with the mounting tension of Joseph's impending decision. The ticket, once a forgotten slip of paper, now bore the weight of an uncertain future. The Shadow of change loomed large over him, promising to transform everything in ways no one could have foreseen. The sun was just beginning to climb the horizon, painting the farm in hues of gold and amber. Inside the barn, Emily sat perched on a hay bale, her worn sketchbook balanced on her knees. Her hand moved swiftly, pencil dancing across the page, as she brought to life the image of a powerful stallion. Mid-gallop. Every stroke was deliberate, each detail infused with the kind of passion only a dreamer could possess. Joseph watched her from the barn's entrance, his figure silhouetted against the morning light. The smile on her face as she shaded the stallion's mane brought a fleeting warmth to his otherwise heavy heart. He hadn't seen her this engrossed in weeks, and yet he knew her joy came with unspoken aspirations, aspirations he feared he could never fulfill. "Dad, come look at this," Emily called out, her voice brimming with excitement. She held up her sketch, the sunlight catching on the edges of the paper. "I'm calling him champion. Doesn't he look like he could win every race?" Joseph stepped closer, his boots crunching against the barn floor. He took the drawing from her hands and studied it carefully. The horse's eyes seemed alive, its muscular frame poised for triumph. "He looks strong," Joseph said finally, his voice tinged with both pride and hesitation. Emily grinned, clearly taking his words as the highest praise. "I've been thinking, Dad," she continued, her voice softening. "What if one day we had a place like this full of horses? We could train them, host competitions, and teach kids to ride. Wouldn't that be amazing?" Joseph didn't answer immediately. Instead, he handed the sketch back to her, his calloused fingers brushing against the paper. "Dreams like that take more than hard work," he said gently, his eyes meeting hers. "Sometimes they take something we don't have." Emily's smile faltered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered. "I know, Dad, but if we could, wouldn't it be worth it?" Her question lingered in the air, her tone a mix of hope and longing. Joseph knelt beside her, his knees pressing into the dusty barn floor. "Dreams aren't silly, Emily," he said firmly, his voice low but steady. "They're what keep us moving forward, even when life feels impossible." Her face lit up again, her confidence restored by his words. She returned to her sketching, filling the barn with soft humming as her pencil continued its work. But Joseph's heart remained heavy. In his pocket was the lottery ticket, its crumpled edges a stark reminder of the decision he had yet to make. That slip of paper could turn Emily's dreams into reality, but at what cost? The weight of the secret he carried felt like a boulder pressing down on him. Later that day, Joseph drove into town for supplies. The narrow streets buzzed with chatter about the mysterious Mega Millions winner. At the general store, a group of locals crowded near the bulletin board, their voices hushed but eager. "Whoever it is must be rolling in money now," one man said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Can't imagine keeping something like that a secret," another voice chimed in. "If it were me, I'd leave this town behind and never look back." Joseph kept his head low, pretending to browse the shelves as their words echoed around him. He paid for his goods quickly, avoiding eye contact, and left without a word. The ticket in his pocket felt heavier with every step, as though it had taken on the weight of the entire world. When he returned home, Emily was waiting by the gate, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. "Dad, did you hear? Someone in town won the lottery. Isn't that crazy? Imagine having that kind of money." Joseph forced a smile, his heart pounding in his chest. "Money doesn't solve everything, Emily. Sometimes it just makes life more complicated." His words puzzled her, but she didn't press further. Instead, she followed him back to the barn, chattering about her latest sketches and ideas for a horse sanctuary. That evening, as Emily sketched by the fireplace, Joseph sat at the kitchen table, the lottery ticket unfolded before him. The numbers glared back at him, each one a promise of possibilities and dangers. Emily's laughter filled the room, a bright contrast to his brooding silence. He rubbed his temples, the enormity of the decision suffocating him. "This isn't just about the money," he murmured to himself. "It's about what it will change, about what it will take from us." Emily glanced up from her sketchbook, her eyes bright and curious. "You okay, Dad?" Joseph nodded, folding the ticket carefully and slipping it back into his pocket. "Just thinking, sweetheart," he said, "about how much you mean to me." She smiled, her attention returning to her sketches. As the fire crackled softly, Joseph sat in the flickering light, his resolve hardening. He had to protect the life they had, even if it meant risking the dreams she held so dearly. For now, the ticket and its promise would remain a secret. But the time to decide was drawing closer, and Joseph knew that once he acted, there would be no turning back. Joseph woke before dawn, the darkness of the farmhouse mirroring the turmoil in his heart. The lottery ticket remained tucked in the same drawer, its edges slightly crumpled from his repeated handling. As the faint light of morning seeped through the windows, Joseph sat at the kitchen table, staring at the casket-shaped shadows cast by the wooden beams on the ceiling. Emily's laughter, her dreams, and her sketches swirled in his mind, fueling a storm of emotions he couldn't ignore. When Emily joined him, her vibrant energy filled the room, briefly dissolving the weight he carried. She plopped her sketchbook onto the table, flipping through the pages to show him her latest drawing, a sprawling sanctuary with grazing horses, children playing, and a banner that read, "Dreams can gallop." Her enthusiasm was infectious, but Joseph's smile faltered as he imagined how fleeting such joy could be. "Dad, isn't it beautiful?" she asked, her eyes alight with hope. "It is, sweetheart," Joseph replied, his voice steady but subdued. "But dreams like that take time. Sometimes we have to work with what we've got." Emily frowned, sensing the hint of resignation in his tone. "I know we don't have much, Dad, but what if something big happened? Something that could change everything?" Joseph's stomach churned. The ticket in the drawer felt like it was screaming at him, demanding to be used, to fulfill the dreams Emily so earnestly sketched. But he couldn't shake the fear of what that kind of wealth could do to their lives, to the quiet sanctuary they had built in their small corner of the world. Later that day, Joseph and Emily drove into town, the dusty road stretching endlessly before them. Emily hummed softly, her gaze fixed on the landscape outside the truck's window. Joseph tightened his grip on the steering wheel as they neared the general store. The town buzzed with rumors about the lottery winner, whispers swirling like smoke through the air. "Did you hear?" a woman murmured to another near the store's entrance. "I heard they haven't come forward yet. Imagine, sitting on all that money and doing nothing." "Maybe they're scared," the other replied. "You know how people around here can be. Once word gets out, everyone will want a piece." Joseph's jaw tightened. He parked the truck and glanced at Emily. "Wait here, sweetheart. I'll just grab what we need." Inside the store, Joseph felt the weight of every gaze, as if the townsfolk somehow knew his secret. The conversations about the mysterious winner grew louder, and Joseph hurried to gather the supplies. As he reached the counter, the clerk, a wiry man named Hank, gave him a knowing look. "Funny, isn't it?" Hank said, ringing up Joseph's purchases. "A man could live like a king with that kind of money, but it makes you wonder, what would a man have to lose to keep quiet about it?" Joseph didn't respond. He paid for the goods and left, his heart pounding in his chest. Outside, Emily leaned against the truck, sketchbook in hand, lost in her own world of dreams. Her innocent expression pulled at his resolve, grounding him amid the chaos of his thoughts. The drive back home was quiet. Joseph's mind raced, torn between the urge to use the ticket and the fear of what it might cost. Emily, sensing his unease, broke the silence. "Dad, you're quiet. Is something bothering you?" Joseph glanced at her, his face softening. "Just thinking, Emily, about you, about us." When they returned to the farm, Emily disappeared into the barn to work on another sketch. Joseph stood by the kitchen counter, staring at the drawer where the ticket lay hidden. His hand hovered over the handle before pulling it open. He held the ticket for a moment, the numbers staring back at him like a taunt. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the barn. Joseph's heart leapt as he rushed outside, finding Emily on The ground beside an overturned ladder. She clutched her arm, wincing in pain. "Emily!" Joseph exclaimed, dropping to his knees beside her. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Dad," she said through gritted teeth, trying to mask the pain. "Just slipped." Joseph helped her up, his hands trembling. He couldn't lose her. Not to an accident, not to anything. The realization hit him like a freight train. He needed to act. The ticket wasn't just about money. It was a lifeline, a chance to secure Emily's dreams and protect her future. That night, as Emily slept soundly on the sofa, Joseph sat at the kitchen table, the ticket unfolded before him. He dialed the number on the back, his hand shaking as he spoke to the voice on the other end. "This is Joseph Carter," he said, his voice low and measured. "I believe I have the winning ticket." The line fell silent for a moment before the operator responded, "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. Let's verify the details." As the call ended, Joseph sat in the dim light of the kitchen, the enormity of his decision settling over him. He glanced at Emily, her sketchbook resting beside her, filled with dreams too big for their small world. The wheels were in motion. Now, and Joseph knew there was no turning back. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on, for Emily, for her dreams, and for the life they both deserved. The morning after Joseph made the call, the atmosphere on the farm felt different. The sun rose as it always did, casting golden hues across the fields, but Joseph's heart was heavy with the weight of his decision. The ticket, once hidden in a drawer, was now on its way to be verified, and the reality of what it meant began to settle in. Emily, unaware of her father's actions, worked diligently in the barn. She was sketching again, her laughter mingling with the occasional snorts of their old mare, Daisy. Joseph watched her from a distance, his chest tightening with a mix of pride and fear. This was the calm before the storm, and he knew it. By mid-morning the call came. Joseph stepped into the kitchen, his hands damp with sweat, and picked up the phone. The voice on the other end confirmed what he already knew. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter," the woman said, her tone professional but warm. "You are the winner of the Mega Millions jackpot. Our team will guide you through the process of claiming your prize." Joseph's heart pounded as he thanked her and hung up. He stood there for a moment, gripping the edge of the counter, trying to steady himself. The fortune was his now, but at what cost? When he stepped outside, Emily ran up to him, her sketchbook in hand. "Dad, look at this one. I think it's my best yet." She held up a detailed drawing of a sprawling ranch filled with horses, children, and wide-open spaces. At the top, in bold letters, she had written, "Emily's dream." Joseph's throat tightened. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily tilted her head, studying him. "You okay, Dad? You seem different." He forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just thinking about how much you've grown. You've got big dreams, Emily." "You do," she said, her face lighting up, "and one day I'll make them come true. You'll see." Joseph nodded, swallowing hard. He wanted to tell her then and there, but the words wouldn't come. How could he explain the storm about to hit their quiet lives? The day passed in a haze. Joseph tended to the fields, trying to lose himself in the familiar rhythm of work, but his thoughts kept returning to the ticket. The town would find out soon enough, and with it would come the questions, the attention, and the expectations. He wasn't sure he was ready. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Joseph and Emily sat on the porch. The crickets sang their nightly tune, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. It was a moment of peace, but Joseph knew it wouldn't last. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but soft, "what would you do if you had everything you ever wanted?" She looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean, Dad?" "I mean, if there were no limits, no obstacles, what would you do?" Emily smiled, her eyes shining with excitement. "I'd build my ranch, a place where kids like me could ride horses and dream big. I'd help them believe they could do anything." Joseph nodded, his heart aching with love and admiration for his daughter. "That's a beautiful dream, Emily." "It's not just a dream, Dad," she said firmly. "It's my future." Joseph placed a hand on her shoulder, the weight of his secret pressing heavily on him. "And I'll do everything I can to help. You make it happen." The next morning, Joseph received another call, this time from a representative of the lottery organization. They informed him that a press conference would be held to announce the winner. Joseph's stomach churned at the thought of standing before cameras and reporters, but he knew it was inevitable. Later that day, as he prepared to head into town, Joseph pulled Emily aside. "Sweetheart, there's something I need to tell you." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with curiosity. "What is it, Dad?" He hesitated, the words catching in his throat. I won something. Something big." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Joseph took a deep breath. "The lottery. I won the Mega Millions." Her mouth fell open. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "It's real, Emily, and it's going to change everything." For a moment, she was silent, processing his words. Then a smile spread across her face. "Dad, that's amazing. We can finally fix up the farm and maybe even start my ranch." Joseph's heart broke at her innocent excitement. "We can, Emily, but this kind of money, it comes with challenges. People will talk. They'll want things from us. We have to be and careful." Emily nodded, her expression turning serious. "I understand, Dad, but together we can handle anything." As Joseph hugged her, he whispered, "This is for you, Emily, all of it, for your dreams." But deep down, he knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. The quiet life they had built was about to be upended, and Joseph could only hope that their bond would withstand the coming storm. Word spread quickly in the small town. The whispers began at the diner, traveled to the hardware store, and by noon, even the children playing in the schoolyard knew. Joseph Carter, the quiet farmer who rarely ventured far from his fields, was the Mega Millions winner. Joseph felt the shift the moment he stepped into town. Strangers who once barely acknowledged him now offered wide smiles and eager handshakes. The cashier at the general store, who had always been curt, greeted him like an old friend, her words dripping with curiosity. "Mr. Carter," she said, leaning across the counter, "I heard about your big win. Must feel like a dream come true, huh?" Joseph nodded, offering a polite but restrained smile. "Something like that." He paid for his supplies and left quickly, his stomach tight. The weight of attention was foreign and uncomfortable. As he walked to his truck, he noticed the way people stared, their conversations halting as he passed. Back at the farm, Emily met him at the gate, her face flushed with excitement. "Dad, you won't believe it. Mrs. Hart came by with a pie, and Mr. Briggs offered to help fix the barn. For free." Joseph sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Emily, people are going to act different now. It's not always going to feel good." She frowned, confused. "But why? You've worked so hard, Dad. If anyone deserves this, it's you." He looked at her, his heart aching with the weight of what she didn't yet understand. "It's not about what we deserve, sweetheart. Money makes people see you differently. Sometimes it changes them." Emily studied him, her youthful optimism dimming slightly. "We'll be okay, though, right?" Joseph knelt in front of her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "As long as we stay true to ourselves, we'll be fine. But we need to be careful. This is about building something meaningful, not about the money." That evening, the phone began to ring incessantly. Old acquaintances, distant relatives, and even complete strangers called, all with a similar message: congratulations, followed by thinly veiled requests. Joseph let most calls go unanswered, the weight of each voicemail piling on his already heavy heart. The next morning, Joseph drove to the local bank to set up a trust for the winnings. The banker, Mr. Fields, greeted him with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Mr. Carter, we're honored to handle your finances. Have you considered investments, real estate, stocks?" Joseph shook his head. "I just want the money in a safe place, enough to keep the farm running and to build something important." Fields leaned forward, his curiosity barely masked. "You're thinking of expanding?" Joseph hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Something like that. But it's not for me. It's for Emily, for her dreams. Fields nodded, though his calculating expression made Joseph uneasy. By the time he left, Joseph was more certain than ever that keeping his plans quiet was the best course of action. Over the next few weeks, the town's fascination grew. People speculated about Joseph's plans, with rumors ranging from extravagant purchases to leaving the town altogether. The pressure weighed heavily on him, but he kept his focus on Emily's vision. One evening, Emily approached him with her sketchbook. "Dad, I've been working on something," she said, her eyes shining. She flipped through the pages, showing him detailed drawings of a ranch with stables, a training ring, and a community center. "This is what I want to build. A place where kids can come, learn about horses, and feel like they belong." Joseph studied the sketches, his throat tightening. "Emily, it's beautiful." "I know it's a big dream," she said hesitantly, "but with the money, maybe we can actually do it." He pulled her into a hug, his voice steady. "We can, Emily, and we will, but it's going to take time and hard work." Emily beamed, her excitement contagious. "I'm ready, Dad. Let's do it." Joseph knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. The town's attention, the complexity of managing the money, and the sheer scale of Emily's dream loomed large. But as he looked at his daughter, her hope and determination, shining brighter than ever, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would build the ranch, not just for Emily, but for every child who needed a place to dream. And no amount of money, or the challenges it brought, would stand in their way. Joseph drove slowly along the winding country road, the sound of gravel crunching under the truck's tires. Beside him, Emily sat clutching her sketchbook, her excitement barely contained. They were on their way to visit a renowned ranch known for its championship horses. Emily had been dreaming of this moment since the project began to take shape. As they approached the sprawling property, Joseph couldn't help but notice the imposing gates, adorned with intricate designs of galloping horses. A sign read, "Silver Ridge Ranch, Excellence in Equine Legacy." The grandeur of the estate was overwhelming, a sharp contrast to their modest farm. They were greeted by a sharply dressed man named Richard, the ranch owner. His handshake was firm, and his eyes held an air of authority. He surveyed Joseph and Emily with a discerning gaze, lingering a moment too long on Joseph's worn flannel, shirt and scuffed boots. "Welcome to Silver Ridge," Richard said, his tone cordial but distant. "How can I assist you today?" Joseph glanced at Emily, who nodded eagerly. "We're looking to buy a horse," he began, his voice steady. "Something suitable for a community project we're working on. A place for kids to learn about horses and riding." Richard's brows lifted, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "That's an ambitious endeavor. Horses here are bred for competition, not beginner lessons." "We're not looking for competition," Joseph replied. "We're looking for potential." Richard gestured for them to follow, leading them to the stables. The scent of hay and leather filled the air, and the sound of hooves echoed softly as they walked. Emily's eyes sparkled as she took in the sleek, majestic animals. She stopped in front of a young, spirited mare with a glossy chestnut coat and intelligent eyes. "This one," she whispered, pointing. Richard chuckled, his tone slightly condescending. "That's Bella. She's strong-willed, untrained, and not an easy ride. Are you sure you're up for the challenge?" Joseph stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "We'll take her." Richard smirked. "And how exactly do you plan to pay for her?" Joseph reached into his pocket and pulled out a neatly folded envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for the exact amount. Richard's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of surprise. "I'll pay in full," Joseph said calmly. The transaction was finalized, but as they walked back to the truck, Emily noticed the sideways glances from the ranch staff and overheard whispered comments. "How can someone like him afford a horse like that?" one voice murmured. Emily looked up at her father, concern etched on her face. "Dad, why do they treat us like this?" Joseph placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "People often judge what they don't understand, Emily, but we're not here to prove anything to them. We're here for your dream." On the drive home, Bella trotted calmly in the trailer behind them, her presence already infusing Emily with newfound determination. Joseph, however, couldn't shake the unease Richard's demeanor had left. He knew their journey was only beginning, and the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. As they pulled into their farm, Emily leapt out of the truck and rushed to Bella's trailer. She opened the gate carefully, guiding the mare out with gentle words and a steady hand. Watching her, Joseph felt a swell of pride. Emily had inherited his resilience, his ability to weather storms with quiet strength. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily sketched Bella in her notebook, her enthusiasm lighting up the room. Joseph sat nearby, silently reflecting. The whispers, the skepticism, the hurdles, they were all worth it. In his heart he knew they weren't just building a ranch, they were building a legacy. Joseph stood at the edge of the field, his boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. The orange and pink hues of the setting sun painted the sky, casting a golden glow over the grazing horses. Their rhythmic movements, the swish of their tails, and the occasional soft neigh created a serene backdrop that contrasted sharply with the storm of emotions swirling within him. He had spent weeks transforming his daughter Emily's dream into reality, but the process brought with it an ache that never fully subsided. Tonight, he stood alongside Richard, the owner of the harass, whose unexpected generosity had made so much of this possible. They had spent the evening walking the grounds, discussing the progress of the project. Now, as the sky darkened and the first stars began to appear, Joseph felt compelled to open up. "I owe you more than just a thank you," Joseph began, his voice steady, but tinged with emotion, "for believing in me, for trusting a stranger when you had no reason to." Richard, leaning against the wooden fence that bordered the field, nodded thoughtfully. He appeared deep in thought, his usual polished demeanor softened by the quiet of the evening. "It wasn't just what you said, Joseph. It was the way you said it, the determination in your eyes. It reminded me of someone I once knew." Joseph turned to him, sensing the weight behind his words. He hesitated for a moment before responding. "Sometimes it's the ones we've lost who shape us the most," he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the last traces of sunlight lingered. "Emily, she was my world." Richard shifted, his posture straightening slightly as he regarded Joseph with newfound intensity. "Tell me about her," he said, his voice quiet but insistent. Joseph took a deep breath, his chest tightening as memories of Emily flooded his mind. Slowly, he began to speak, his words deliberate and heavy with meaning. He told Richard about Emily's vibrant spirit, her endless curiosity, and her unwavering love for horses. He described the countless hours she spent sketching designs in her notebook, dreaming up a future where their modest farm would become a haven for others. But his voice faltered as he recounted the day of the accident, the screech of tires, the flash of panic, and the unbearable silence that followed. "When I found her notebook after—" Joseph paused, his hands gripping the fence rail tightly. "I knew I couldn't let her dreams die with her. Everything I'm doing, it's for her." Richard remained silent, his gaze fixed on Joseph. The normally composed man appeared visibly moved, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. When Joseph finished speaking, the silence stretched between them, the weight of their shared understanding filling the air. "I know that pain," Richard said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes, usually sharp and guarded, softened as he looked at Joseph. "I had a daughter once too, Isabel." Joseph turned to face him fully, surprised by the revelation. He waited, sensing that Richard wasn't finished. "She loved horses," Richard continued, his voice tinged with regret. "Just like your Emily. But I failed her in ways I'll never forgive myself for. I was so focused on building this harass, on creating a legacy, that I missed what truly mattered. She died in a car accident the night after we fought. Her last words to me were, 'You'll realize one day that money can't replace love.' The weight of Richard's confession hung in the air. Joseph reached out, placing a steady hand on Richard's shoulder. "Our daughters may be gone, but they left us with lessons we can carry forward. We can honor them by doing better, by making something meaningful out of our pain." Richard nodded, his expression one of profound gratitude. "That's why I gave you the best horse in my stables, Joseph. It wasn't charity. It was my way of trying to make things right, of seeing some part of Isabel's dream fulfilled through yours." The two men stood in silence for a long moment, the connection between them unspoken, but deeply felt. Slowly their conversation shifted from loss to hope. They spoke of the children who would come to the farm, the lives that would be touched, and the legacy they could build together. Richard offered more than just emotional support. He pledged to connect Joseph with others who could help bring Emily's dream to life on a larger scale. By the time the first constellations appeared in the night sky, Joseph felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't alone in this journey. The pain he carried, though immense, had found a counterpart in Richard's story. Together, they could channel their grief into something extraordinary. As the evening came to a close, Joseph returned to the farmhouse. The glow of the porch light illuminated the worn notebook in his hands. He traced the outline of Emily's handwriting on the cover, his heart swelling with determination. Standing on the threshold, he looked out at the starlit fields and whispered, "We're closer now. Emily, I promise we'll make it." Joseph woke to the soft hum of the farm, a symphony of distant birdsong and the rustle of the morning breeze through the trees. The days had grown longer, not in hours but in purpose. Each sunrise brought him closer to realizing Emily's dream, a sanctuary for children, a place where hope and possibility could flourish. Yet, as he stood by the kitchen window, sipping his coffee, he knew that the journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, but for the first time, he didn't feel the weight of them alone. That morning, he drove into town, his truck laden with pamphlets, detailing the upcoming Field of Dreams initiative. The goal was to rally support from the community, to invite them into the vision that had been born from Emily's sketches and nurtured by Joseph's resolve. At the local church, he set up a modest stand, spreading the pamphlets across a table. The title read, "Emily's Field of Dreams, Building Hope One Child at a Time." As townspeople passed by, many stopped to read the pamphlets. Some offered kind words, others nodded in quiet approval. But there were skeptics too. A gruff man in overalls glanced at the materials and scoffed. "A farm for kids? Sounds like a waste of good land," he muttered. Joseph, unshaken, smiled and replied, "Sometimes the best use of land is to plant seeds of hope." Among the supporters was Clara, the owner of the town's bookstore. She approached Joseph with an encouraging smile. "You've always been quiet, Joseph, but this is loud in the best way. Emily would be so proud." Joseph felt a lump rise in his throat as he thanked her. Clara's words reminded him of why he was doing this, why he couldn't let the whispers of doubt drown out the roaring purpose in his heart. By the end of the day, he had a list of volunteers, carpenters, gardeners, and even a group of teenagers eager to help prepare the fields. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Trucks loaded with supplies arrived at the farm, their wheels churning up the dirt as workers began clearing spaces for stables, classrooms, and open fields. The once quiet farm buzzed with life as volunteers hammered, painted, and planted. Joseph worked tirelessly alongside them, his hands calloused from labor, but his heart alight with hope. He found himself invigorated by the energy around him, his grief slowly giving way to a sense of purpose. Richard, true to his word, visited frequently, bringing not only resources but also connections. He introduced Joseph to Anna, a retired equestrian who had spent years teaching children with disabilities how to ride. "This place," Anna said, her voice warm and steady, "has the potential to change lives. I'd be honored to be a part of it." The first test of the program came sooner than expected. One Saturday, a group of children from a nearby foster home visited the farm. Joseph watched as they tentatively approached the horses, their eyes wide with wonder. Anna led them through basic riding lessons, while volunteers guided the younger ones in painting wooden signs to decorate the property. Laughter echoed across the fields, and for a moment Joseph could almost hear Emily's giggle among the chorus. One boy, Sam, caught Joseph's attention. He was quiet, much like Joseph had been at his age, but his gaze never left the horses. When Joseph approached him, Sam hesitated before speaking. "I've never been this close to a horse before," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Joseph knelt beside him, his tone gentle. "Neither had I, not until Emily showed me how special they are. She taught me that horses don't just carry us, they lift our spirits too." Sam nodded, his small hand reaching out to touch the horse's mane. It was a simple moment, but one that Joseph knew would stay with him forever. Watching Sam's quiet joy, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was why he had to keep going. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the children gathered for a bonfire. They roasted marshmallows, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of the flames. Joseph stood at the edge of the gathering, his heart swelling as he took it all in. Richard approached, handing him a mug of coffee. "This is just the beginning, you know," Richard said, his voice carrying a note of optimism. Joseph nodded, his eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "I know, and it's a beginning worth every effort." That night, as Joseph sat on the porch, exhausted but content, he opened Emily's notebook. Flipping through the pages, he paused at a sketch of a horse surrounded by children, a ribbon tied around its neck. Beneath it, Emily had written, "A place where dreams take root and grow." Joseph traced the words with his finger, his resolve solidified. The farm was no longer just a piece of land. It was a living, breathing testament to Emily's vision, and in its transformation, Joseph found his own, a path forward, not just for himself, but for every child who stepped through those gates. As the first stars appeared in the night sky, he whispered, "We're getting there, Emily, one step at a time." The morning of the grand opening dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself was offering its blessing. Joseph stood at the edge of the farm, watching as the first cars pulled into the makeshift parking lot. Volunteers buzzed with activity, guiding guests and ensuring everything was in place. The once quiet and solitary land now hummed with life, a stark contrast to the stillness that had defined it just months ago. The centerpiece of the event was the newly finished sign that hung proudly at the entrance. Emily's Field of Dreams. Painted in bold, vibrant letters, it was framed by sketches of horses and flowers, lovingly recreated from Emily's own notebook. Joseph stood beneath the sign, his heart swelling with pride and bittersweet emotion. It wasn't just a name, it was a promise kept. Guests began to gather near the stage, a simple wooden platform decorated with fresh flowers and bales of hay. Among them were familiar faces, neighbors who had once doubted his vision, children from the foster home who had visited during the trial run, and even local reporters curious about the farm's story. Joseph spotted Richard near the front, standing alongside Anna and the volunteers who had become like family. The hum of conversation quieted as Clara, the bookstore owner, stepped onto the stage. She had offered to act as the MC for the day. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice warm and inviting, "we are here to celebrate not just the opening of this remarkable farm, but the spirit of resilience, love, and community that made it possible. Let's welcome the man who turned a dream into reality, Joseph Carter." Joseph stepped onto the stage, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the microphone. He wasn't used to speaking in front of crowds, but as he looked out at the sea of faces, he felt a surge of courage. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion bubbling beneath the surface. "This farm, this place, it's not just about horses or fields. It's about dreams, Emily's dreams." He paused, glancing at the sky as if searching for the right words. When I lost my daughter, I thought I had lost everything, but in her absence, I found her voice. She had a vision for this farm, a vision of a place where children could find hope, healing, and a sense of belonging. Today, that vision becomes a reality. The crowd erupted into applause, but Joseph raised a hand, signaling for quiet. This wouldn't have been possible without all of you, without your support, your belief in something bigger than any one of us. And it's only the beginning. As the applause swelled again, Clara returned to the microphone. Thank you, Joseph, for reminding us all what community and determination can achieve. Now, let's cut the ribbon and officially open Emily's Field of Dreams. With Richard by his side, holding the ceremonial scissors, Joseph cut the ribbon. Cheers filled the air as the gates swung open, inviting everyone inside. Children rushed toward the stables, their laughter mingling with the neighs of the horses. Volunteers guided families through the farm, showcasing the riding trails, art stations, and picnic areas that had been meticulously prepared. One by one, people approached Joseph to express their admiration. A woman with tears in her eyes said, "My daughter has been struggling since we lost her father. I think this place might be exactly what she needs." Another guest, an older man, shook Joseph's hand firmly. "You've given this town something to be proud of," he said, his voice thick with emotion. As the sun began to set, the crowd gathered around a bonfire near the main stable. Joseph, standing at the center, held Emily's notebook. "This notebook," he began, lifting it for everyone to see, "is the heart of everything you see here today." Emily filled it with her dreams. And now, thanks to all of you, those dreams are alive. He opened the notebook to a page that read, "A place where children can soar." Looking out at the faces illuminated by the firelight, he continued, "This isn't just Emily's Field of Dreams anymore, it's ours. A legacy of hope for every child who steps through these gates." The crowd stood in silent awe before breaking into applause once more. Joseph felt a tear escape as he murmured, "Thank you, Emily," under his breath. Later that night, as the last guests departed and the farm settled into a peaceful quiet, Joseph sat on the porch, gazing at the stars. The pain of loss still lingered, but it was now tempered by the fulfillment of purpose. He closed his eyes, picturing Emily's smile. "We did it, sweetheart," he whispered. "We really did." Months had passed since the grand opening of Emily's Field of Dreams. The once quiet farm had transformed into a sanctuary teeming with life, laughter, and hope. Children arrived daily, their faces alight with excitement as they greeted the horses, learned to ride, and painted their dreams on canvases in the open air. For Joseph, every day felt like a tribute, not only to Emily, but to the countless dreams she had unknowingly inspired. Joseph stood near the paddocks, watching a group of children gather around Luna, the horse Richard had gifted him. Luna had quickly become a favorite among the young riders. Her gentle nature seemed to sense the fears and anxieties of the children, soothing them with her calm presence. As Joseph leaned against the fence, he saw a little girl with pigtails approach him shyly, clutching a drawing. "This is for you, Mr. Carter," she said, holding up a crayon sketch of a horse with a rainbow mane. "Thank you for letting us play with the horses." Joseph knelt to her level, taking the drawing with a smile. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is beautiful. You know, Emily would have loved this too." The little girl beamed before running off to join the others. Joseph folded the picture carefully and slipped it into his pocket. It was moments like these that made every hardship worth it. Inside the main stable, a new addition was being unveiled. A small plaque had been mounted on the wall, bearing Emily's name and a quote from her notebook, "Dreams are seeds. Plant them with love, and they'll grow forever." Around it were framed photographs of the farm's journey, from its humble beginnings to the joyous scenes of children riding, laughing, and finding solace. Richard approached Joseph, a rare smile softening his typically reserved expression. "The place has come a long way," he said, his voice warm with pride. Joseph nodded. "It's more than I ever imagined, and it's only just the beginning." Richard clapped him on the shoulder. "You've built something extraordinary here, Joseph, something that will outlive us all." Later that afternoon, a reporter from a local news station arrived to document the farm's impact. She interviewed parents, children, and volunteers, all of whom spoke of the farm as a beacon of hope in the community. When it was Joseph's turn, he stood in front of the camera, his hands resting on the gate of the paddock. "This farm isn't about me," he said simply. "It's about Emily. She had a vision for a place where children could feel free to dream, to heal, to grow. I just did my best to honor her memory. Every smile I see here reminds me that her spirit lives on." The segment aired that evening, and the response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, along with letters from people who had been touched by Emily's story. Some shared their struggles, others their gratitude, but all carried a common message. Emily's dream had become a light in their darkest moments. One of the letters came from a girl named Sophie, a foster child who had visited the farm. "For the first time," she wrote, "I feel like I belong somewhere. Thank you for giving me a place to dream." Joseph read the letter aloud to Anna and Richard during a quiet evening at the farmhouse. His voice trembled, but his heart swelled with pride. "This is why we do it," he said. "This is what it's all about." As the seasons turned, the farm continued to thrive. Joseph expanded the programs to include therapy sessions for children with special needs and workshops for struggling families. The community rallied around him, volunteering their time and resources to ensure the farm's mission endured. One crisp autumn morning, Joseph stood at the edge of the field, gazing out at the bustling activity. Horses trotted along the trails, their riders laughing with unrestrained joy. Nearby, a group of children painted murals on a barn wall, their faces smeared with vibrant colors. The sight filled Joseph with a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Emily's notebook, now worn and frayed from constant use. Flipping to the final page, he found her last written words: "A place where everyone can belong." Closing the notebook, Joseph looked up at the sky, where the sun cast a warm, golden glow over the farm. "We did it, Emily," he murmured. "Your dream is alive." The sound of children's laughter carried on the wind, blending with the soft nickers of the horses. Joseph smiled, his heart full. Emily's field of dreams was no longer just a farm. It was a legacy, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. What lesson did this incredible story bring to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to Living Narratives and give it a thumbs up. Every story here is crafted with care and love, designed to touch hearts and spark reflections on life. Your support is essential to help us keep bringing these heartfelt narratives to life. Take a moment to explore our other videos and share your experience. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next moving story on Living Narratives. Let us know where you're watching, where you're from.